Michelle from Off the Beaded Path. And today I'm having a fangirl moment because I have a special guest with me today, Kate McKinnon. If you do not know her, she is a wonderful bead weaver. She has written several books, but I'm going to let her introduce herself. So, Kate, introduce yourself to us and let us know all about you.
Well, I think the theme that runs through my life is asking questions about what I see around me, right? And so that's the same answer to your question about how I got into beading or why I wanted to write a book. It's because for whatever suite of reasons, I seem to see things differently than other people. And I have what I call system eyes. So when I'm looking at a thing or a conversation or whatever it is around me, what I'm really trying to do is trying to relate it to what I already know. And I have a lot of questions. So people ask me about myself. I say, well, I'm just made of questions. There's nothing else. Nothing else. Once I have the answers to a question I might have, then those just become more questions, bigger questions, and they go into this little thing I visualize like a little wizard bag that I keep with me, like this little sack of questions, and I carry it wherever I go. And that just tells you everything you need to know about me. I'm very curious, whatever I'm doing. I try to be fully present, and beading, it offers something that no other type of study does, which is that it's unit based. Every bead is like a little brick, a little cell, and I can make what I will of them. They can just be a little pile of beads on the table, or they can grow into something that has its own kind of life. And so our beadwork definitely focuses on energetic forms, tension, architecture. And so I think really that tells you everything you need to know about me. If you just apply it out.
So you were probably one of those very inquisitive children who ask a million questions.
Yeah, and I was an early reader. I was just born with questions, and I immediately had questions about everything around me. I remember that as a small child. So as I say, there's nothing else really to know about me except that I'm always trying to figure out what's going on. And I never understand why other people seem so sure that they know what's going on. But they do seem quite sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love your analogy and why you like beading because it's little bricks or little blocks that you can make
Yeah.
into whatever. Because that's what I tell people why I love seed beads because
Yeah.
you're making little individual things and you're making a whole new, something completely new out of it. And that's why I love seed beading. Well, Kate, how
Yeah.
did you get into beading?
Well, again, it was just one of those sort of magical things. And a lot of people have a magical story, right, about beads, but it was a pretty something. I was standing on a bridge in Venice, a place I'd never been before. And I was next to just the most beautiful person I'd ever seen, a sister of a good friend. And she had this bracelet on her wrist that glittered in the sun. And I admired it. And she told me she'd made it. And I actually had never quite heard of seed beading. I hadn't really noticed that people were making fabrics and that type of jewelry. It turns out they were just square stitched check 4mm glass beads.
Oh, wow.
In a little strip. But there was something about, I had never seen beads arranged that way that spoke to me of architecture. That's what I hadn't really seen before. And I just really wanted to know, how do I attach the beads together? That's all I need to know. And if you ever interview Nico Williams, he's an amazing beader up in Canada, ask him about his origin story. Just to interview Nico Williams and ask him about how he came to beading. And that'd be a really great podcast too. I won't spoil his story.
I love it. I will definitely look him up. That is amazing.
Yeah.
Well, out of all of this, it made you write your
Yeah.
contemporary geometric beadwork, and
Yeah.
you've come out with 2 volumes of these so far. So tell me what made you decide to write, because to me, you describe it best as not a pattern book, but basically a journey almost.
Yeah.
Um, to me, this is a textbook.
Yeah, I think that's closest. It's an explorer's handbook is the way that I think of it. A textbook, which is one of the books we have in process here, an academic textbook, would be written by someone who presumes to know what they're talking about, right? And well, ideally. And I see, as I say, I see this a lot, people presuming they know what they're talking about and writing learned volumes. Well, so that's not what was going on here at all. I was such a novice. I had experience doing different things. And that was actually my fifth book, the first CGB book. I'd written several books for Interweave about metalsmithing, metal clay. And then I had also written two other just sort of in-house publications called Studio Annual and a project workbook. Really, they were all the same thing. They were just like, hey, I've noticed these things and I had these questions and I got some answers that I haven't seen other people have yet. And I want to share them with you and see what you make of it. And that first book that you held up, the CGB book, was really entirely thanks to the internet. I remember in the early 90s when the internet opened, right? And I was on it like green on a bean. I mean, right away, I knew that was something that interested me. I wanted to reach out and find other people. And so I wrote my own code and I just started a journal online.
Oh, wow.
Early on, right? We didn't have word blog or anything like that. And I began writing because that's, again, just sort of what I do. And people all over the world were reading. And when I started beading, people beaded along with me. When I moved, I shared a house with Dustin Wedekind, who was at the time writing the Bead Boy column and then became the editor of, Beadwork magazine. And we'd been friends for a long time. When we moved in together, we discovered we had some of the same long-standing questions about beads and beadwork. I had already a really good audience online because of the blog. And we thought, hey, okay, let's just share our questions. And so we decided we were going to have a seed bead summit so that we could bring together all of the people that we really admired as seed beaders and throw all our ideas together and see if we had some of the same questions. And that's how it started. And so it started in a very open source manner of people just sharing ideas with each other. And it was a really distinguished crowd we had at the first one. And we then made a list of our questions, put them up online, and the answers just came in the mail. They were beaded. Answers
Oh,
came in the
wow.
mail.
Uh-huh.
You want to know what my very first question was?
Yes, please.
So I had just seen the work of English beater Jean Power, who's a genius, right? And what caught my eye was one thing specifically, and I call it geometric rope. Like we named it the Power Puff bangle, just because I wanted everybody to know that Jean Power had made it Power Puff. But these sort of ideas where you have a peyote rope or some other type of beaded tube that then breathes out geometric forms and breathes them back in at whatever rate you desire. And some people's pieces were triangle, rope, square, but Jean Power was making all of the shapes in these incredible twisting ropes that were obviously fundamental. I recognized them immediately as pieces of the universe. I'd never seen anything like them. And I'd never done peyote stitch, not really. I don't like the long peyote start. I mean, I'm a busy person. I got a life to live.
Right.
And, and so turns out Justin Wedekind also avoided the peyote start. Bead boy knows every stitch in the land. And he's like, hate the peyote start, just will not do it. And I thought, brother. And so what we wanted to know about Jean's work, which turned out to be the same question about Julia Prettle's work, Diane Fitzgerald's work, all these other geometric pioneers, is why is everything spoken of in terms of corners, 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 corners? I'm like, there's two sides to a corner, y'all. It's really different if you're inside the room or you're outside the corner. And I said, okay, so what if we unroll one of those forms, a triangle, a square, and then what? Then what? I said, what is a corner if it's out in a field? Then what do you call it? What do you call it? A peak, a mountain, a hill, and people were like, well, that doesn't apply to our work. That's when that question is not applicable. We are making geometric forms. And I was like, yes, but what if you unrolled it? And so, okay, maybe I couldn't get the people around me to understand what I meant, but on the internet, I cried this cry into the night. What is a corner when it's out in the field? What if there's only one? What if there's 5 in a row? And I didn't know too much about increase and decrease patterns, but sure enough, what came back were lines of horns and horned bangles, and people like Karen Benningfield, Gabriella Van Diepen, Christina Vandervlist. Boy, they knew exactly what I meant. And a lot of people who are your customers and students, you know, these expert beaders, they were like, oh, I know what she means. And they were like, brrr. And I would open the mailbox every day and things would tumble out. I didn't know what they were doing or how they were doing it. And I think the most important thing is I was right up front about that.
Yeah.
So I had to learn. That's why it's taken so long. I had to learn everything, and I did. Oh,
Wow.
I did.
Oh, I bet you did.
Oh, I
I
did.
absolutely bet you did. Well, that is a good lead in, though, to my next question. So, two of these are published.
Yep.
What was your biggest takeaway, or what was the biggest thing you learned after these two books?
That is an easy question to answer because what I learned, I took to heart very deeply, which was that some of us are explorers. Some of us prefer to follow directions and have really bounded parameters. And other people are incredible problem solvers, right? And they seem to be different groups of people. Sometimes, you know, you get lucky and those skills all overlap for you or someone else, and they make these gigantic breakthroughs. But I have found that normally you need all of the people involved in order to make a true fundamental discovery. And the joy of making those books was that I found a lot of people like me who had a lot more experience than I did. So as solvers, they could do things that I couldn't. But the people that I left out, not intentionally, only because I didn't have the skill to bring them along, were all the people who also didn't know what was going on, who needed patterns, who needed instructions. And I had never been able to follow a beaded pattern in my life. So I certainly wasn't the person to create them. And that was what has taken so long, was that I needed to not only, I feel like I had to go get 2 PhDs. It was that much work, 11 years,
Wow.
right? But I had to learn enough about everything so that I could explain it in the simplest possible way. And having never taken on that job before, I didn't know how long it would take. And so 11 years later, I sit in front of you, assembling the final pages of the pattern book, which was the book meant to bring everybody forward.
Mhm.
Everybody,
Yeah.
curious beginners, I say. That I can't really help people who don't know anything.
Right.
That we're not going to quite get to the level of this is a needle and this is a thread and teach all the basic stitches. What we're going to do is we're going to pick up at the point where you've learned a few stitches. You know how to put some beads on a needle, make some knots, maybe make a little something. Now we can really take off. If you can just learn how to make a single peyote triangle or a single peyote square, pick one. I can take you on a full journey. I can show you the difference between your inside and your outside, and how to use your edge or any portion of your edge to spring off a new form. I can teach the most complex ideas about deconstruction and family relationships, because boy, it sure took me a long time to learn what was family in the world of geometric architecture. It's not always immediately obvious.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. Oh,
all of
God,
those.
to sit at a table with you. Oh my goodness.
Come
Wow.
to one of the workshops. We have 2 coming up in the spring. And that's the fun of it all, is to get together, because when we talk this way, we gain a lot of clarity. And when we do experiments together, just fooling around, all of this was just fooling around.
Wow.
So that's the joy in life, as it turns out, you know, don't you think, when you're beading with your people?
Absolutely. And it goes back to what you said. There are several different groups of people.
There
And
really are.
like when I teach retreats every summer. So when people come and they come to my store and they do the retreats, I sit there and I go, okay, well, I've got this pattern I'm working on and I'm doing this, but I just can't figure this out. Like, or I
Mhm.
don't like this. Somebody
Mhm.
immediately pops
Yeah.
up and goes, oh, well, why don't you XYZ? And then my
Yeah.
brain is like, why did you
Mhm.
not think of that? It's such a good problem solving
Mhm.
thing. So it's really good when you have all these different groups of people at the table because you really
Absolutely.
can come up with some amazing stuff. But
Mhm.
so we talked about the contemporary geometric beadwork and how you describe that as an explorer's handbook. But your
Yeah.
new book, you're calling a pattern book. So,
The pattern book, yeah.
yes. So, what is going to be the biggest difference between the three books that would be, I guess, in a series almost?
Patterns.
Yes.
Patterns. Yeah. Literally step by step. And um, this is what I worked hardest on as someone who could never read a chart, right? I don't even understand what the words word chart mean together. Or any words there. I don't know word chart. I don't know. A lot of these words left me out.
Mhm.
I was one of the people who couldn't do it. So I thought, okay, well, why couldn't I do it? It turned out there were several reasons. And one of them was how the beads were portrayed. Another one was that there weren't any visuals. And the biggest one was that there weren't visuals in different frames of reference for me to access. So I discovered that what I needed was a photograph, an illustration, and a line of code that made sense. Because what those charts really are, those are like the DNA, the genetic code that then springs the form into life. And if you follow these instructions, then this will spring to life in your hands, right? Very exciting. And once you think of it that way, it made it easier for me to make what I called illustrated word charts. And so when you see them, and actually you have seen some of them in the patterns I've released, like the pattern for the flat star, that's a curious beginner pattern. And it's very carefully illustrated, you know, and
Yes.
discussed. And then the little pop outs that show you exactly what's going on and repeat the line of code. And then little illustrated lines of code. So you'll have the instruction and then a picture of the instruction on top of it. And I think that those things that took a lot of time to really be able to make charts that we felt anyone could read without reading the words. Should be able to do the thing. And so that's the biggest difference. And my hope then is this will bring everybody along. Also, and I know this was part of the question you had later on, but it fits in here, which is that you said the first books were mostly about emerald, and that's true. We engineered that stitch specifically as an architecture to do things like go with a bunch of increases and see what happened. I mean, in peyote start takes rows and rounds to come together. We needed something where we could build it unit by unit, not in some long gathering in.
Right.
And so we wanted to be able to do more. So I always dreamed of casting directly off of edges. If I'd been a knitter, honestly, I think if I had come to beads knitting, I would have had much more like with charts and I would have known about casting off and
Right.
maybe have a starter strip, right?
Yep.
And then so instead of having to load individual stitches on the needle, well, I always wanted to use the edges to cast off. So now we have two new edges. The casting spine is one of them, and that's for long or straight work,
Okay.
maybe little too. But the podcast bead is the zigzag form, and that was the first one that I found. And so we can cast anything that's zigzaggy, rick-racky, wingy off of a zigged form and cast straight things off of a straight form. It lets them develop more normally, more naturally.
Yeah.
Like, you made ruffles, right? Beaded ruffles. We all
Yes.
have.
Yes.
Well, here's the thing. If you let them develop naturally, they'll be spirals. They're not really ruffles. What you're doing is by forcing increases there. Yeah, it's a ruffle if it's trapped,
Mhm.
but it's a spiral if it's free. Now, that struck me as very interesting because this is like the difference between a static form, something trapped or that doesn't move, and an energetic form. And the curls and the spirals and the casting spines, that's as close to life as beadwork is going to get. I mean, that is lively stuff. So one of the things we noticed when we came into this field of geometric beadwork was that even though these were technically lively forms, chains of things and ropes of things, and the ropes would sort of accordion breathe, they still just mostly lay there on the table. And look around you. I mean, shoot, what's more interesting? Things that are laying still or things that are growing and changing?
Right.
And I'm very partial to things that move and grow. So one of the things I disliked about Patty Starts and Gathered Forms is the business of laying in the cells you'll need to build the body later. There's a lot of room to go wrong in that. I mean, you leave out a bead, you've just wasted maybe a week of your life, right?
Yeah.
And so to build everything from potential, from increases, not gathered together decreases was my goal. And I mean, that was a big goal if you think about it, to not use decreases to make a rickrack. Well, we did it. We did it. And I discovered what was so important about energetic forms and morphing surfaces. And it led me into mathematics and physics and material science. And I say it was important. So somebody had to write it down.
Yeah.
Who else is going to? As far as I could tell, I'm been the one that's been interested. I mean, if I hadn't kept pushing these questions, I'm not sure other people really shared my fervor for understanding what energy meant when it came into beadwork. But we now have forms that breathe, swim, morph, pop open. It could be dangerous even. So
It is incredible to see the things that you guys write in these books. It has been incredible to see what people have done with those,
yeah,
how they have expanded on these, and the
yeah.
amazing pieces that have come out of these. But speaking of your like six-pointed star that you were just talking about, I sat down last night and tried and went by the directions. Oh my God, they are amazing. I loved the diagrams and the
Yeah.
pictures of the beadwork as it's going. It's so nice. Everything is really cool about it. But the one thing, you have been super generous throughout the whole process of giving away these patterns for free. Now, of course, they're not finalized pieces, but in general, anybody like myself can sit down and make one of these. What caused you or what prompted you to be so generous with giving away some of these things for free?
Well, I'm not sure it's exactly generosity, although I mean that's like a good principle to live life by, right? But it's more, I would say, a collaborative effort. We're an open source team, which means that we're acknowledging in that there exists fundamental knowledge in which everyone is entitled to. No one should really charge for. I think that's again just sort of a life focus I have, is that information is for the people, and if it isn't, it's probably not healthy information. Like, so there's a lot of fundamental information that should belong to everybody, but then, and like we talked about before, if only one person or a small group of people is offering their solutions and ideas, in my mind, that's pretty stale room. Even if it's exciting work, what you have there is a collection of patterns, not a living, vibrant exploration with open-ended questions. And so the best way to solve open-ended questions and to make progress for the people is to have an open project. And I wouldn't say it's been easy. The easy part of it has been giving things away and getting things back. I mean, that's just like the natural flow of what air and water in the universe, right? To put it out and things come back. The hardest part has been people having a fear of open source. And so this has actually delayed our publications 3 times significantly and caused a lot of extra work because people suddenly fear publishing in an open source way and pull their work from the project or something like that. And so that's been the only hard thing, is other artists being fearful of letting go of their work. But I feel like we all came to this work as a collaborative effort. So the right thing to do is to continue to keep giving it back out, because that's the only way we're going to get new things back in. And it hasn't been a commercial or a financial issue for our team, because people are eager to support the project and they don't mind buying the books. So when you say giving things away in finished or unfinished form, so note that, and you may not know this, that the entire technical section of books 1 and 2 has been available for free on our website in finished form to everybody since the day it was published. So the whole basic section, free to everybody. You don't have to buy our books in order to learn what we know. And we have a YouTube channel that's been going since the internet opened, basically. And that's been my Explorer's Notebook. So if anybody has any questions about who is doing what when, really all they need to do is just go back and look at the videos, because what I did was actually the day I discovered a thing, literally the day, I would make a video and go, and then other people would be able to work on it at the same time as me. And so the YouTube channel, everything is on there for free. People may not, the books are great because you don't have to dig for what you want to know. You don't have to watch a long 30-minute video of people's questions just to learn how to make a kaleidocycle. But kaleidocycle is a good example of something that I have flatly refused to publish until now. We were kind of given it as a gift, the geometric triangle kaleidocycle that everybody's made, by Susanna Thompson, who bumped into it. She had the Escher book of origami kaleidocycles that a mathematician and a graphic artist had made in the 70s as a child. And she thought, hey, I bet I could do that out of beads. And she made it and she showed it to me. And we did have the opportunity then to write and publish a pattern, and could have made giant stacks of money doing that. But I looked at that thing and I thought, okay, this is another fundamental piece of the universe. This here is fundamental information, and I don't understand what's going on. And so instead of selling the pattern, we just decided to let everybody else exhaust themselves on that. And I dove in and boy, I found some really shocking and interesting and beautiful things. And I discovered that there was a mathematician in the 1930s, a French mathematician, who cataloged this entire set of infinite linkage. It's an infinite set of these linkages, these rotational linkages, and the kaleidocycle was one of an infinite set. And it didn't belong to anybody. And in retrospect, I'm really glad that we went the way that we did. And now that I've come through 6 years of study on this little machine, I think I understand where it fits and what its family is and why it's so mercurial and confusing to people. And I think I'm able now to simplify the explanation of it. But I found actually in my explorations that even the mathematician who wrote the Escher Cycles book had never heard of Raoul Bricard, the mathematician who cataloged the linkages. They never made that connection. And so it was a new discovery for them. It keeps getting newly discovered. And that right there, again, is a sign of a fundamental thing we better take a hard look at.
Right, exactly. Wow,
So,
6 years.
yeah.
Wow.
That's just an example of the process we've gone through with each one of these things. It takes a lot to understand even a warped square if you're really asking questions.
I know, it was so funny. Years ago, I was looking at the warp squares, and I talked to my friend Franklin, and I was like, so Franklin, I don't get it. Like, I just don't understand some of it. And he sent me straight to your videos, and I was like, I understand that now. I get it. I see it.
Yeah.
So the videos are amazing. So for somebody who's has no idea what we're talking about, where can they find your YouTube channel?
It's Contemporary Geometric Beadwork is the name of the channel at YouTube. And another thing that's there, which is really helpful, and maybe you saw these, Julia Prettle, she did animations for us of each of the basic forms, including like a warped hexagon, warped square, even the podcast feed, bead by bead animation, so you can see them coming together. And the interesting thing about the warped square is that it's no different from the triangle. Not at all. It's just that there's a fourth increased line. And when it starts to come alive in the hands, because it doesn't fit, it's a not fitting problem, right? So all of the increases over 3, they're going to warp.
Yep.
And when it starts coming alive in people's hands, either they bond with that or they don't. And so that's why we had an interesting workshop where we asked people to choose which one they wanted to learn, the triangle or the warped square. And it really, there were clear groups of people. And the people who wanted the square, they didn't care that it was warping. They thought that was great.
Uh-huh.
Nico Williams, in fact, the warp square came to his hands. He was meaning to make a triangle, but he'd accidentally put in a fourth increase. And he said, well, I'll just go with it. It'll still be a triangle, something like that. And it came into his hands, just like the kaleidocycles and things come into people's hands. And so again, very fundamental form leapt into his hands. And those things, they need to be for all of us.
Yeah.
And the individual patterns, well, I mean, that's somebody's artwork, and we have a good social understanding about what to do about that. And so we never police our work. If I find someone making CGB stuff out there, which I do all the time, that doesn't even know about our project, so how could they credit us? I would just feature them on our Facebook page or something like that and say, look at this beautiful thing. And then they'd find us and we'd find them. And I always felt like, ooh, a new friend, right? And so that turned out to be a much healthier approach commercially as well, because you run around making friends instead of feeling like you're in a competition. And so that's been really energizing for the whole team. We've made so many friends. Is Franklin Martin Jr.?
Yes.
I love Frankie.
I do
Yeah, he's
too.
done some great contributions to CGB. Really, it's just some neat stuff. He's a fabulous beader. Just another example of this talented people that we've had a chance to work with. They're all over the world, and we're all beading together. We think about each other. I'd say we have it's a very loving thing, beading together, right? When you're not competing.
Hey, it got me through COVID. Man, did it ever get me through COVID. Being able
Yeah,
to Zoom with people and be with
yeah,
people all over the world, just
yeah.
to be able to sit and bead and do something, kind of, I don't want to say lethargic, just to, just get your mind off everything. So,
It's
yeah.
calming, right? It is. It's calming and it's fundamental. An interesting thing about beads too, and I still puzzle over this. There seems to be something in our particular DNA, humans, about beads. The animals, they're very nimble. Like there are birds called bowerbirds that make art exhibits, and they'll get all the blue things. They make gallery exhibits to try to get mates, bowerbirds. And weaver birds, they're very capable of ornamenting their fibers. They just choose not to. Primates, we've given different sorts of primates lots of opportunities to work with needle, thread, fibers, whatever, and they choose not to. There's something about beads in us. Any human child, any human, you see a shell with a hole or something and put it on a string and put it around our neck, and we ornament our bodies and we understand beads. And so that was another thing that drew me very strongly, because what is this thing that we know so well and so dearly? It seemed, again, fundamental. So, as a solver, when I see things that are fundamental, those are like if they were playing cards, those would be the royalty, fundamental things, because you can use them to solve other questions. If you know one thing. So solving the problem of all of the architectures, we had to really beat all of the numbers first. We had to learn all of the increased patterns and what they meant. And it's taken, again, a very long time to get proficient.
Wow. Wow. Well, I know that you have the pattern book coming out. Now you also have a coloring book, but it's not technically a
Oh,
coloring.
really? Actually, it is. So one of the ways we design is we publish a lot of blank graphs for free, so like just a blank graph of the triangle, the square, the star, whatever, so you can color in your own. And a lot of our artists, some do it on the computer, but many of us do it with colored pencils and a printout of the graph. And so if you've got a bunch of blank graphs, you can take your colored pencils and work out colorways, right? We also have origami folding patterns. So a lot of our rotational cycles, like the Cly cycle, the bat cycle, other cycles, they're just folded polygons. And so origami folding those forms is the best way to learn it before you sit down with beads. And lots of extra pattern graphs and extra charts, for like triangle petals and all these kinds of things, so that you can see the variations, color your own. But it's meant to be a tool to use with the books. And so that'll be a really fun thing. And then the other two new books we have coming out they're pretty important too. There will be a CGB Volume 3 to clear up the Explorer's Guide, then finish it off, right? Because it's incredible to say this, but I actually did answer the questions I set out to answer in those first two books. I have those answers now, and I think it would be really neat to wrap up that series of books with all the extra photos and stories and things that really don't have a place in the pattern book, which is meant to be very general for everybody. Who cares how we learned about what not? Well, there's a place for that, and those stories and extra pictures will be in volume 3, and that will end that series.
Okay.
And then a really special book that we're making, and we may sell to a publisher. I don't know. This is going to be a very beautiful thing, a hardcover art book, just pictures and maybe some paragraphs, just big full page hardcover fine art book, so that we can truly honor all of our fine art creators. And that would include some of the people who maybe weren't comfortable publishing their work in the pattern book, or that sort of thing. People who treat their work as fine art and maybe don't want it replicated, right? That's a venue for publishing all of the work like that, and then just showcasing all of the work that we've done over the decades. And then the very last thing is an academic textbook, so that, and this is actually something really dear to my heart, you can't get a PhD in beadwork right now. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And even hard to get a master's degree. So 2 of the people on our team, Catherine Shriver, who's a research fellow with CGB right now, and Nico Williams, they graduated from Concordia with masters in beadwork, but Nico came through sculpture, Catherine came through painting. And the only other place geometric beadwork is in the curriculum is at Sam Norgar, who's a professor at SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design here in Savannah. She teaches it in units at Savannah College of Art and Design. And so that's really the only academic presence we have, and that's ridiculous. And so since we can connect our work to all of the fields, I mean, it doesn't matter what you study, material science, optics, physics, we got it. We got it. And we can show it. And so we can make a terrific elective that people from other fields, mathematicians, architects, whatever, can really enjoy taking, because everybody has to take an art elective, right? And then also it'll be useful, this curriculum we're making, for people who want to take a degree. And so that's been a real focus of this fellowship that we fielded for Catherine Shriver. And I'd say that's been the most significant thing that we've done, just trying to make a place for academic study, and there are no living wage fellowships for artists. It just doesn't exist.
Right.
Even the professors at art school don't get paid well. Half of what a science professor would get. So we fielded a full living wage fellowship for Catherine Shriver, $60,000 a year plus medical insurance. And, I mean, that's just enough to get by these days.
Yeah, it really is.
So that's where all of our money has gone and will go, because we're also doing one for Sam Norgar. And we want to continue to lift people up who want to take this further and want to study it, want to write about it. And so that's another benefit of being an open source team, is that, all of that income that comes from these books is significant, and we want to really do something with it. So we provide materials, education, fellowships, and then very small amount will go to the creators as royalties. But honestly, even if we only get $1 a book, the way publishing works, that's a very high amount. Exactly. That's a bestseller rate. You get $1 a book, you're really doing something. So since we publish our books ourselves, this is the only commercial thing that we do, and that leaves a lot of money left over to put people forward.
Wow.
So that's our entire mission, really. That's it. That's why we're doing it. And this should wrap up the series, but that won't stop us working.
Good.
This will just give us things that we can sell forever, because I really feel like, how we're all still buying Carol Wilcox Wells' great book on beading.
Yes.
Well, that's what we're doing. We're making something like that, but not for general beading. We're making that for geometric beadwork.
Wow, that will be incredible. Absolutely incredible. I cannot wait to see that come to fruition. And Sam Norgar, I actually came to know, I don't know her personally, but I came to know of her through the Hilton Head Bead Society. Yeah, so they help with some of the things that she does every year, like her whole what is it called?
Like a black and white project, the community project. Yeah,
exactly.
That's really great work. And the black and white project, which she did last year, is a portrait of the beader Joyce Scott, and it's incredible. And who heard about that is Joyce Scott. And she was so enchanted by what we were doing, and she fell in love with the idea of the fellowships. And Joyce Scott just donated the most incredible piece of artwork to our team to sell, to help fund Sam's sabbatical. And I just was just stunned at that. Sam put up on Facebook one of my blog posts talking about making it and pictures of making it. A lot of it was assembled in this room right here. And I just think, well, this is another example of a giant open source thing that's being done all over the world. It's lifting people up, it's making forward motion, and it also led to further generosity. I mean, this is a no-brainer, but not everyone can work this way. So as a bead store owner, you understand one of the problems, which is that generally instructors aren't hired to teach technique or just come share their personality. Bead stores like to have proprietary patterns, like you make something special. Well, all those things are just going to be variations, right? And then those become sort of embargoed. You can't teach them to other people because this is what you're teaching to bead stores. And then when you publish in a magazine, you have to use a cold start, loose bead start, because that's just what we do. Well, the magazines, maybe I wish they had looked at that more carefully while they were still thriving. Because I think that there was a lot of room to teach people to grow.
Right.
But each of those completely understandable pathways at bead stores and in publishing really left out the people who were innovating and really boxed in the people who were continually replicating variations, right? And so we didn't really get very far. And I don't know that there's an answer to that yet. But the way we work doesn't really work for people who need to make their living writing articles or teaching in bead stores, because that open source isn't good for business on those ends. And so that's been something we've really had to work through. And as I say, it's lost us collaborators, but hopefully we'll pick them all up again in the fine art book and find a way to move forward together in all the things that we do. Because like you said, if we don't have everybody's input, then we're not doing our best. I
Right.
think that's really the bottom line of it. To do our best, we need to include everybody.
Exactly.
And
Exactly. I love it. I absolutely love it. I was looking here at my questions and man, we have flew through some questions. I love it. Now, I will say the only thing I would love for you to talk about, and it's just because I started out my 6-pointed star. Love it. Okay, did it. But now can you talk about number one, thread choice on projects,
yeah.
especially geometric projects, and
Mhm.
tension on these projects? Because
Yeah, like the
that's
tension.
exactly, because I know that's going to be the thing that is going to get people, especially people like me who are very, very tight beaters. So when I
Mhm.
saw this 6-point star, I made the wavy star. So,
Yeah. So we talk a lot about that on team. We talk about that in each of the projects. And like the star is a good example, because when it's time to make a spiral, you may make a very tight spiral. Your slinky stack will be like literally like a slinky, right? It'll climb and go downstairs. Someone with softer beading, their slinky stack of stars will fall into a chain of bellflowers. And so really the question you have to ask yourself when it comes to tension and thread is, what is the effect that you're going for?
mhm,
Like, you trying to make something tight? Maybe you are because it's architectural. Are you trying to make something like a lush fabric? Well, we can learn to do that. And so we have learned, even though we have proclivities, right? On teams, some people bead like they could cut with their beadwork. Catherine Trevor was one of those people, very, very tight work. And then she came and experienced some of the softer, looser, more fabricy work of other people on team. And she thought, I bet I could learn. And she learned. And I watched her learn. And I learned too. I learned that if I'm going to assemble, say, a warped thing,
mhm.
it's actually much better to leave the beads a little bit loose when you start, not ever pull anything tight. And so I learned to be more mindful about my starting tail. I don't make a knot or anything like that. I always leave my starting tail a little loose so that when I have the form ready to stand on its own, I just pull that starting tail and the end thread and whoop, up come the thing, right? It just pops off the table. And you have a choice in how hard you pull that. You have a choice in how hard you pull your thread out of your needle. And so I always say that it's one of the best exercises a beater can do is just try. People who make really soft work, their work just is like It's like a cat. It won't get up and dance. Their casting spine just lay there, right? and their podcast speed just drips. And maybe they want to pull a little stronger, right? And so some people, they don't pull their thread at all after the stitch. Other people are like yankety yank yank, right? And then also the way people pull their thread through the beads. Some people pull their thread against the bead hole. They kind of like the feel of it. Well, that's not very good for your thread.
Right.
And so lots of these little choices people make when they're beading will affect the tension, the the life of a form, and then also how long it lasts. People who pull really tightly or pull the thread against the beads, well, their beadwork probably won't last as many decades as it would if it was just a little looser. So I always say, as a tailor, a seamstress, I say to myself, well, what is this? What am I trying to make? How do I want it to feel? And we had some really interesting experiments. Like, you know, what's really fun? Start a warp square at your tension, right? Tight in the middle, and then loosen it up after maybe 6 or 7 rounds. Just go loose. Don't pull your thread tightly. Just every so often neaten it up, and then you'll have a stiff center with this incredible draping wings. Alternatively, you can start soft, and then you can firm up the last 3 rounds for a moving center with really fashionable pointy tips. And so you see, those two techniques are actually the same, but they give you radically different pieces.
Right.
And so that's my best advice. I think that in general, a medium tension is always going to serve people best on all of those fronts, but it may not serve your final intentions. And so our default is a medium tension without too much tugging. And then I really love Nymo, the thread, but that's only because I buy the big tall spools. And so the tall spools are coated thread. It's upholstery thread. The bobbin thread is literally the bobbin thread.
Yeah.
And I don't know why they don't wind bobbins with the good stuff. You know, I actually, we're getting a sewing machine and winding our own Nymo bobbins to give to people so that they can feel what that thread's really like. You don't have to wax it. For me, it's perfect. People have passions about threads and needles and how they start, and they should follow those passions. But I like to use Nymo B, and I like tulip size 11 needles.
Yeah.
And the scissors I use are always tiny embroidery scissors with a really sharp little tip, because when we actually take apart our beadwork, we put those scissors tips into the increase lines and cut. That star you made, I can make 6 nips and you'd have 2 stars in your hands, the outline and the center, and no beads would fall off. And this is deconstruction, and it's a magical thing to see. But that's why we use a little teeny tiny scissors. So that's one of the magical discoveries that we made, that it just seems literally like a magic trick.
Wow. Oh my goodness. I know. I was actually, as I was making this star last night, I was sitting here going, okay, now how can I take and chop this so that I could almost, you know, how some tables go together? I was like, how
Yeah,
can I do that? So it's
yeah,
a 3-dimensional. Like, I was sitting here thinking of this
yeah.
last night. So I've been thinking of that in my head, but going back.
So
Oh, go
you
ahead.
could do something. You could take it apart into 3 sections just in the flat form, and then you could turn those sections inside and fix them in place, you know, like some Christmas ornaments are.
Yep.
But the only way you can get things chained is if you make them Mobius. Like if you make a Mobius ring and then you separate it in half, it'll be 2 chain links.
Right.
And that's part of the coloring book too, is Mobius strip experiments, because what you can do, you can make the most incredible things. But taking things apart at the increased lines, like you just sort of talked about, oh, I wish I could just split it at the increased lines. Well, that's one of the things that's really hard to do. And in the reverse star flower pattern that we released, Catherine made a kind of a mocked up herringbone increased line that could be left separate if the pass-throughs weren't there. And so if a person made the reverse star flower petal by petal instead of in the round, that's where you could see a split in the increased lines. But that's one of the things that I've never found a way to do except faking it.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be a real increased line, right? You'd have to fake it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
Tailoring.
and I would just, you know, I had to really, really work on my tension for this piece because, like I said, instead of a beautiful flat star, I had this wavy star going on. But
Mhm.
that's what always cracked me up when
Yeah.
people, I see people online talk about what do you stuff your 3D stars with? And I'm like, I've never made a star that was so soft. I needed stuffing. Like you could probably
Yeah.
throw it and knock somebody out. So
Yeah. Right. Right.
nice being
So there's advantages to stiff beadwork, but so I just say to you, try not taking the extra tug after you complete your stitch and go right on to the next one. You know, it really will shock you. And this shocked me. We just made a video while Catherine Schreiber was just here working with me, and she made videos of all of these new techniques because we're going to give those to for free so that you have the pattern and you have the video of every single round because that we really care.
yeah.
And anyway, Catherine was when she set up beading, she was beading. She's a loom weaver. She's a big loom on the wall and all that. So what she does is she grab a bead, take a stitch, grab a bead, take another stitch without pulling her thread. Grab a bead, take another stitch, grab a bead, take another stitch, and then pull on the thread at once. And I said, no, I don't think we should be showing that. Can't show that on TV. That's what I said. And she said, well, this is how it's done. And I was like, wow, I've never done that once in my life. But the sort of speed beading tactics people have,
Right.
sometimes it's easier to use a lower tension if you make this 5 or 6 stitches and then you just even them out and then you don't tug it. You just move on to the next stitches. And so that was one way. Once I saw that, I thought, oh, I can do that and adjust my tension that way if I need a really soft piece. And so that worked for me actually. And maybe we can show it on TV.
Oh my, maybe it'll get very tight beaters like me. Maybe it'll help
Yeah.
us out. But honestly, Kate, I cannot thank you enough as just not as a shop owner, but just a general beater,
Thank you.
someone who loves the geometric shapes and loves to play with beads. I cannot thank you and your team enough for doing something like this,
Thank
honestly,
you.
because it helps us who don't have that time to take and explore that so deeply.
That's it. Time. Yes.
Yeah. So it really helps us and it helps us to improve our skills and
Yeah.
helps us to just improve in general. And you have given me so much to think about today. So I am so grateful for you and your
Thank
team
you.
on doing this.
Thank you. Well, we will. And I hope you enjoy all the new work. I mean, just to see it coming together on the table last weeks has been one of the most thrilling things of my life. Just to see all these beautiful pieces made by all these beautiful people. As I say, some of whom you know, your customers you'll see in this book. And yeah, it's going to be a very joyful thing. And we'll be making a grand tour. So be sure and have one of us to your shop and also come and visit us. Really, I think you'd really love one of our workshops. So
Absolutely.
consider.
Absolutely. I'm going to look that up because Savannah,
Yeah.
love it. Went there for the first time last year. We took a riverboat
Oh,
down from Hilton
oh,
Head. We had the
yeah.
best time. So I would love to
Yeah.
come back down and visit. And
Yeah.
so when people want to purchase a book, they want to look at the free patterns, all of that, where do they need to go online to do that?
Contemporarygeometricbeadwork.com is our website, and it also comes up as Beadmobile at WordPress. That was what Dustin named it when we first started our blog. He was like, well, like the bookmobile, we're going to be the Beadmobile, Kate. And I said, okay. So that's what our blog on WordPress is named, is the Beadmobile, wordpress.org. But contemporarygeometricbeadwork.com should get you where you need to go to. And as we go along closer to publication, we're going to make more of a splash and have more of a commercial presence and all of that. But right now, we're just a bunch of nerds trying to get pages together. and we can't wait to give everybody these things we've been working on for so long.
I love it. Now you're on Facebook too, right? Contemporary
Occasionally, yeah. And Contemporary Geometric Beadwork has a presence on Facebook, and we have our own page. And I haven't been on social media much in these last 2 years. I've just been working, but we do publish our news on that Facebook page. And so that's a good bet for people who use Facebook, is just follow us on Facebook. You won't miss a thing. And then you can follow our WordPress blog too. You can just put your little email address in and follow, and you get all of the updates in your email, which includes all of our free patterns. They just show up in your email. And going to the website at any time, it's a nice place to plunder, just like the YouTube channel. contemporary geometric beadwork at YouTube, and they're all there. Every single thing we've ever learned.
Wow. Well, guys, I hope that you learned something today from my conversation with Kate, and I hope that you will definitely go over to the Geometric Beadwork. Follow them on YouTube, Facebook, follow the blog, because these are going to be incredible. If you don't have this book and the second one, make sure to get it, because you can get it digitally now,
Yeah,
right?
that's the only way, really.
Okay.
The only copies, physical copies that are for sale anymore are like $800 on Amazon. They're just being sold by bots, I think. But the digital copies will be around forever. I'd love to update those. I didn't want to reprint them as they are because they don't have any of the new techniques in them. I mean, that's like 12-year-old wisdom.
Right.
But I would love to reissue them after all this is over, and I hope that I do.
It'd be amazing, because
Yeah,
now that the big publishers are not here anymore, it's so
yeah.
like, just to hold a book, just to hold
Yeah,
a big
I
book.
know. Yeah, the books are really special, and yeah, they have a big place in all of our hearts. So
Oh,
thanks for loving them.
oh, no problem. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Again, make sure to go and follow Kate on all of her ramblings and all of her knowledge. And we will see you again next time.
Thanks, Kelly.